Good morning, everybody. We are 2 minutes late. We've had a bit of chaos here this morning, but it's okay. We're here. We made it. Welcome to this brand new episode, installment, or whatever you like to call it, of HR Buzz Chat Live. We've got a good one for you this morning. Another really interesting guest who I'm very excited to introduce and get chatting to. And whether you're watching live or catching up later, get involved in the conversation. Drop us some comments. We're going to be checking in with the comments throughout the live stream today. But also, we like to continue these conversations after we come off air as well. So obviously, the replay will be up live. Share it with anyone who you think might be interested or for whom it might be useful, and get involved in the conversation. So again, even after the fact, drop us some comments, and my lovely guest Richard and one of the team here will come back to you as well. So what is today's topic? Well, it is Change Management 101, and this feels close to home for us because we're going through a lot of this ourselves at the moment here at my group. So really interested to dig into this with you, Richard. And the kind of subtitle for this is Stop Announcing Change and Calling It Strategy. Now, I know that there's been lots of change across the world of work over the last 5 or 6 years, and with the advent of quantum and AI and all of this interesting stuff, I'm sure there's a lot more change to come, and I think you guys are seeing that too. So I think today is very topical for not just us, but all of us. And so, yeah, let's get into it. So every organization talks about transformation. We hear about digital transformation, culture transformation, business transformation, AI transformation, almost daily, right? It's constantly being fed down our throats. Yet, despite all the investment, the planning, the good intentions, many change initiatives still struggle to deliver the outcomes people expect, right? Why? That's the big question we're going to be looking at today. Because implementing change is rarely just about launching a new system, introducing a new process, or sending out a communications plan. It's about people. Every business is about people. Everything comes back to the people. And that's often where things can get a bit complicated. So today we're going to unpack all of this. We're going to unpack the messy reality of organizational change, from rushed implementations and poor communication through to change fatigue, which is a very real thing, resistance and leadership disconnect. All big things that we have to contend with. And so I am delighted to be joined by someone who has literally spent years helping organizations navigate exactly these challenges. And that is Mr. Richard Page Brown. Welcome to the show, Richard.
Thank you, Jamie. Great to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us. Now, Richard has extensive experience across HR transformation, digital experience, operating models, and continuous improvement. Throughout his career, Richard has worked with organizations to design and deliver meaningful change, helping businesses improve the way they work whilst ensuring employees remain at the very center of that transformation journey. Today, he's going to be sharing practical advice for HR professionals who often find themselves leading those change initiatives, whether or not they have formal change management training or not. Richard, once again, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Jamie.
So fantastic to have you here. Before we jump into the questions, we'd love to hear from anyone watching today. Let us know in the comments, what is the biggest change challenge you're currently facing in your organization? What is the biggest change challenge? Drop it in the comments. If you want Richard's feedback, then let us know whilst we're on the live stream. And we'll try and bring some of these discussions into the topics today. So why does change get such a bad reputation? Perhaps we'll start with one of the big questions. And people often say that employees hate change, but is that really true? Richard, what do you think?
Yeah, and I don't think it is actually. So we all know that change is the only constant, really, isn't it? So that happens all the time. I think the problem that people tend to do mistakenly is jump ahead and think change is just about the comms and the training, and don't start with the building blocks. So the building blocks for me are about helping people understand why the change is happening and then how it will impact them. And there'll be some benefits and perhaps some other consequences. But we need to spend time at the front end of any change initiative understanding how the change will impact an individual or a team, and spending time in that zone rather than jumping straight ahead into comms and training.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I've been doing a bit of research recently on communities and what makes communities work versus not work, across all kinds of societies across the entire world, because it struck me recently that actually a business, an organization is just a group of people, right? And a group of people, what is that? Well, it's a community. Yeah. So surely the same rules, laws, and guidelines, principles, if you like, that help us create prosperous, successful communities could be applied to businesses as well, and perhaps should be. And actually, if we took maybe a more organic look at how we build that community within our business, putting the people at the very center, as you say, if we can bring them on board, it's not often that they have to like it or that they're going to enjoy every single minute of it. You know, people will go through the mill. If you look at people who join startup organizations as an example, right? They're often not getting paid very much, or they're sleeping on the office floor. It's not a great environment, but they're part of something bigger. How can we bring more of that into our change management programs?
Yeah, so I think for me, you know, it's the awareness at the front end, isn't it? You know, why is the change happening? So you know, as part of that community or as an individual, you need to be invested and bought into the change right from the outset. So to understand why, and in some cases also, you know, the consequences of not changing, because that may be equally as powerful. But why is this change happening? How will it impact me as an individual and the team that I sit in? And how will I be supported on that change journey? Is absolutely critical. If you try and jump ahead beyond those points and don't establish that point of awareness, the point of desire, then people are confused, they're not engaged, and you'll be taking them on a journey without being properly invested in that change in the first place.
Absolutely. But is that just one-way comms, or is that more of a conversation?
No, it has to be a conversation. So, and again, this is where people jump into the comms and think it's, you know, by pushing and sharing messages that will solve the problem. In doing that, though, what you fail to do, though, is understand perhaps some of the concerns, some of the resistance that may come from that individual. So it's absolutely paramount. You take time at the front end to explain what the change is, but then to listen, to sit back, listen, and find out if there are concerns. You know, and where are those concerns founded? Is it because somebody's perhaps uncertain about the new world and how they'll get there? They're not sure how they'll be supported on the journey. Is it because they're invested perhaps in current ways of working or the system they operate? So you've really got to get under the skin, first of all, to find out what it is, you know, what it is that's a point of concern, and what might become a very genuine point of resistance, and then try and manage that early, rather than just assuming that life is good and then realizing the problems then perhaps later down the line.
Yeah. So I'm curious as well, like this consultation process, I think a lot of people shy away from that because of the time and the effort that's involved with it. And often, you know, perhaps organizations can get carried away with delivering the project rather than focusing on what the end goal is and what they're trying to achieve. But I feel like, certainly in my experience, it's not even, you know, that consultative piece is very important, and you don't even have to end up with making everybody happy, because let's agree that's impossible, right? And so I think it's less about having the I think, and again, this is where some people I think get confused, is we have got to have the consultation to make sure that everyone's happy and has everything they want. No, I don't think that's what it is. I think the consultation piece is more about people feeling heard. I don't think that you actually need to agree with them on every point, so long as they feel heard. What would you say to that?
100% accurate. Yeah, that's right. I think I'm just going back to your point there. So, you know, let's slow down to go faster later on. So, you know, my background in change management, I'm very much aligned to the ProSci ADCAR methodology, and that talks to 5 stages that happen throughout the course of the change. Awareness and desire are the first 2 stages there, and that really is, as I've described earlier, about getting people bought into the change, getting them understanding that. If you attempt to run beyond that into the next stages, all you're doing then is sharing the information, sharing the comms, sharing the new ways of working, but you don't have people invested in the change journey. So yeah, I guess also thinking back to the time when I was a project manager, you know, you would speed through your list of activities, tick them all off. You would think the world is great. You'd switch on the new bit of tin or the new way of working, but actually, if you do run through those stages too quickly, you get to the point then where you're in the live running, where you should have a level of adoption, but you look around and that adoption's simply not there because people haven't been with you on that journey properly. They haven't got your point of competence at each of those 5 stages before then that point of go live.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the biggest risks, if any change initiative, is not bringing your people with you. You know, people are the lifeblood of a business. If you're not bringing them with you on that journey, then you're just setting yourself and them up for failure, in my view. switching gears slightly now. So this is something many of our audience today will probably relate to. A lot of change projects seem to end up landing on HR's desk, whether they started there or not, let's be honest. Why is HR so often expected to carry the responsibility for organizational change, do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's something I've experienced quite a few times. It's I think typically, certainly in smaller and mid-sized organisations, there isn't an established dedicated change function. So where else will that change be managed? So typically go one of two ways. If it's an IT type change or transformation, IT could lead that, or HR, perhaps if it's more people, culture, and more increasingly HR tech as well. I guess the reason why HR is well positioned though is that it understands the construct of the business, it understands role profiles, it understands how they all come together. Typically, also comms and training will sit within the HR function as well. So that all makes sense to that point. The bit that I've seen though along the way, and a bit where I guess part of my career leans into this, is developing though a change and project management sort of capability directly within HR. So and that's becoming something, I think that's becoming more normal now. But without those dedicated skills, the project management and the change management, it can be very difficult for HR to continue that leading that change journey, because they don't simply have the right framework or the skill set to make that happen. But yes, it is understandable why change might sit within a HR function.
I suppose they're people at the end of the day, aren't they? And as we've said, you need to bring your people on that journey with you. Who better to task with that than HR, right?
It's quite. Yeah, exactly.
And of course, as you mentioned there, many of those projects do involve technology, and we're moving into this, exponential technological age almost, aren't we? Where things are just moving so quickly. It's like things are changing on a daily basis. And, it's impossible to talk about change in 2026 without talking about technology and AI and quantum and all these other things that are happening. And many organizations we're seeing now with the CapEx releases, they're investing heavily in new platforms, tools, building out their own infrastructure, and the AI companies as well, investing in all of the infrastructure that sits behind that. We're moving forward at an unprecedented speed. But technology alone doesn't solve all the problems, right? So what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. So AI is accelerating everything overnight. So you'll see within the HR tech products, lots of AI being built in there, but also lots of bespoke AI, all competing to get attention and usage. So what you don't want to do though is simply automate or push out to AI the problems that you've got without thinking those through properly. So very much to focus on end state and also the problems that you're facing, really, what it is you're trying to solve, and then work back from right to left, really, almost there. So that might mean before you attempt to look at AI or some automated tools, some new tech, look at the problem statement, look at what you're trying to solve, look at the gaps that exist perhaps within your organization. And a good way to lead on all that piece really is to again focus back in on the individual and to do a bit of a change impact assessment. So and that's all about understanding what people's roles look like today, what they might look like tomorrow, and then helping them to bridge the gap between those two. So part of that will lead to improving processes, streamlining, and that's what you get through digital transformation. Lots of those mundane tasks get removed or automated. But then understanding what that person's role looks like today and tomorrow, and helping them through that journey. So after you've built that awareness and that desire, it's the upskilling then. So it's the knowledge and the ability. So it's the training, it's the education, it's the practicing as well in a safe environment before then you finally transition then into that new future state and allow people then to operate in that new way of world.
Yeah, and it reminds me of social media, and the pace of AI seems like it's so much quicker than the pace of social media was back in the early 2000s. But we had to kind of learn how to behave online. And I think in many ways, we're still 20 odd years later, still trying to figure out how we behave online and what the guardrails are and what the rules are. And it seems like we're in a similar position with the whole AI piece. And so my question to you is this about doing what we currently do, but to a higher level, better quality, quicker, or is it more about taking a real cold hard look at okay, the world has changed a lot. Maybe we should be doing things differently or completely cutting things out altogether.
Yeah, and I think it's, first of all, it's just stepping back and understanding what is it. How can I leverage technology and AI to make things better? So I think so real value in taking out those very basic tasks because they can be automated. But then understanding how people will interact with that tech or AI and to get maximum value. So it's about optimizing the human element through leveraging the tech that's available there. And I think that will take a bit of time for people to practice and get used to that and really start seeing the benefits coming through. So you can dabble in ChatGPT, in Copilot. I think practice is key here, really. Understanding what the tech can do, where it supports you. Start small, start with some easy tasks, and then start to build it from there. But yeah, very much let the tech and the AI do the good work and allow you then to focus your energy and efforts very much on the value add and the bits that really need that human focus.
Yeah, absolutely. The sands are shifting very quickly, so to speak. There was a great question just coming from Phoebe, actually. She was saying how great topic, really interesting, but my goodness, this can make me feel really overwhelmed because there's so much and it's moving at such pace. And Phoebe shared that she's not a decision maker. So, Richard, do you have any tips or advice for someone who isn't at that kind of C-suite level, who isn't necessarily a decision maker when it comes to navigating the change that's perhaps in many cases being imposed upon them?
Yeah. So, and again, this is coming back to either at an organizational level or an individual level, having a change framework that you can align to, really. And this is the reason I've mentioned it before. There are other change models out there, but the ProSci-ADCAR model I love because it works at an organizational level, but it also works very much at that individual level. So to get a bit of an understanding about what ADCAR is, so the awareness, the desire, the knowledge, the ability, and then the final step is reinforcement. So I would take some time out to try and learn something about that particular model. And then what you realize actually is that people go on a very similar journey. Perhaps there's some nuances along the way, but we all want to understand why the change is happening. We all then want to be invested in that change. And then the next part then is the upskilling. So to understand, having understood what the change is, to make sure then you feel competent in that new world, to have the ability to play and test things. And then once you get then into the new world, feedback's very good as well. So to something like Phoebe, to have somebody, perhaps a network of change champions or a colleague even, to sound ideas off, to provide feedback, and to go on that sort of continuous improvement loop will always be very helpful. But people will go through the change at different speeds. So remember that point there, and give yourself the time and space to understand what's going on and to practice.
So just immediately picking up on that great point there, Verity's come in just saying that challenges often surface way further down the line after the dust has settled. So what is a typical timeline and stages you see in a change management project?
Yeah, and that very much depends on the nature of the change, really. So, some of the projects I've been involved with are relatively small. You can see those come to fruition within a few weeks or months. Others, I'm involved in a big HR tech project at the moment. That will run over the course of 2.5 to 3 years. So it really depends on what it is you're trying to achieve and what you're doing there. But if you follow those steps then along the way, you will make sure that you are handling resistance or concerns early on in the process and they get managed rather than them surface then in 2 years' time when you come to go live and that hit you. So horses for courses, different projects will dictate where you're at. But following a defined methodology will help you get there in a very structured, organised way.
Sounds like that it would be worth anyone, decision maker or otherwise, looking into that methodology if they haven't done so already. And so there's a bit of homework there for our audience. Enjoy, guys, enjoy. I got a question for everyone watching, actually, while we're addressing the audience. Have you introduced any AI tools into your organization recently? And how's the adoption gone? We'd love to hear your experiences in the comments. So if you can drop us a comment, we'll cover it with Richard in the next few segments. So let's talk now, Richard, about understanding resistance to change. Resistance is probably one of the biggest frustrations that organizations encounter, but I'd say resistance isn't always a bad thing, is it?
No, not at all. Resistance actually means people have started on that journey of being engaged. So yes, they may be pushing back or showing some barriers, but actually typically that's because of a lack of understanding or a lack of engagement at that time. So the worst thing in fact would be silence. Resistance typically though is vocal. And it's a good thing, because what you'll hear through resistance then are the objections, are the concerns that will manifest later if they're not dealt with at an earlier stage. So 100% take the time to listen to the concerns and the resistance that's coming through. And that could be, it could be objections, it could be people essentially not wanting to let go of the past. So look at that. That will then help you understand then and plot through a bit of an action plan in terms of how you'll deal with that resistance. So there'll be different factors, different things. One of the things I found really helpful though is as you go on that journey where you are hearing resistance, is to actually focus in on those people perhaps who are most vocal, the biggest dissenters, and to make a real plan about winning those around and using those people then ultimately as your change advocates as you go on the journey. So to onboard those people, to not to brainwash them, to get them very much involved in the change, but then they can be a massive asset then as then you are moving through the project to help manage then others perhaps feeling in a similar way.
100%. I think that's really insightful. Yeah, resistance is still a conversation. I'd much rather have a conversation than complete apathy and complete silence. That is just like a silent, slow death, isn't it?
Exactly.
What role do line managers play here then? Because, often they're the people employees look to first when change is happening. So what's their role in all this?
Yeah, so a critical role. So up front in the project, you've got things like the strategy and the way, the rationale for the project being communicated typically by a project sponsor or certainly senior leadership. When you get later into the change journey, certainly around the knowledge and the ability stages there, the line managers are critical because they're the ones actually who are the closest to the employees, the people that are going through the change. And therefore can have those conversations, can understand where there's resistance, but also can support, coach and mentor people then through the changes, because they have a real understanding of how it will impact their roles in right down there in the detail. So managers need to be spending a lot of time with their people, understanding what the change looks like, how it will impact those individuals, and then really helping them along the way. So they come out of that curve then with confidence. They're clear on the new ways of working. They know their part. They are able to interact with the new tech if that's what's appropriate. But yes, being there as the guide and mentor at all times as they come through that. And then that also then continues once you're in a new future state. Also then manage to play a critical role then in that feedback mechanism as well. So if people then are seeing challenges or concerns arising in the new future state, they play those back through the manager, and the manager in turn then can relay those back and help them work through potentially some post go live changes or whatever it might be. But yes, managers play a critical role from the point of knowledge onwards.
Feels like we're putting a lot on the managers here, and we're expecting an awful lot of them. Richard, how do we support our managers through this process as well then?
Yeah, so that's another good thing, isn't it? So understand those individuals will be going through change as well. So same thing applies. It's the same framework. Back to that change impact assessment you do at the front end, really. So this is not just looking at the various personas and the individuals and understanding how their jobs will change, but part of that will be looking at how managers' roles will change during the project and after the project. So again, it's about investing the time and energy there to make sure those people got the support. They've got a support network around them that they can go and talk perhaps to other managers to find out what best practices are working elsewhere. But yes, to support all individuals on the journey and to look out for signs of fatigue as you go on that journey as well, because I think managers could potentially feel a little overwhelmed sometimes if they're trying to manage all this on their own. So they will need that support, and they will need the early preventions, early steps to make sure they are effective through the journey.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's get to the nuts and bolts then now, Richard. Let's think about what good change management looks like. Okay. We've talked about what goes wrong. Let's focus on what good looks like. So if an organization wants to improve its approach to change management, where should it start?
Yeah, so Be 100% transparent about your journey. So if you're coming from a point where you don't have an established change management framework, go and invest time in one. So and that doesn't necessarily mean about having to bring in new resources. It could be if it's a complex project or current resources are stretched, but it's about understanding that change management models and frameworks exist for a reason. It's because they are based on previous successes, but also failures elsewhere. So what you don't want to do is go through a journey and just do it with the light bulbs off. Really, let's all be joined up and be clear on what that is. So invest time in establishing a framework and a model. And pick on one that will really work for your organisation. So there are a few out there. McKinsey 7S operates one. There's Cotter's, there's Bridges, there's the ProSciad car thing I've talked to, and others. But definitely go and find one that works for you, and then bring it to life. So get your people involved in establishing that as a framework, and perhaps trial it as well on some smaller level of change to see if it works, to get some learnings and feedback before then embarking on perhaps a bigger change project.
Yeah, that's a good shout. I mean, loads of good advice there. But the one thing I took away from that was, well, two things, I guess. Have a framework, because look, there's no need to reinvent the wheel, right? And stand on the shoulders of giants. Why make all the mistakes yourself if someone else has already made it?
Exactly that.
But yeah, and the other one's just completely gone out of my head, so we might even come back to that later. Let's do a bit of change management surgery then. Let's get the audience involved if we can here and open things up to them. So we've asked people to share their challenges, and we'll work through as many as we can. We've had some interesting comments come through already. And I'm thinking about things like, new HR systems that maybe aren't being adopted. You've put it in, but people aren't using it, or they're not using it properly. Things like resistance from management teams. Change fatigue across the organization, a very real challenge, very real thing as well. Yeah. And then AI implementation concerns, culture change programs that have stalled. So we just had a comment coming in from Jonathan. Thanks, Jonathan. So when managing change in an organization, is it best to rip off the plaster and change quickly? Might hurt, but the outcome happens quicker and new normal is quicker, or go slowly and try and explain everything, but maybe give people more time to dwell. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for me, the latter. And I've done this now over a few decades now. I've seen the outcomes of both those sort of approaches, really. The quick approach, yes, will get you a result quicker, but then will it give you the full adoption you're looking for, and will it be sustainable? Often not, really, is what I've seen. So I think taking the time up front to properly understand the change, to get people invested and bought into that, will feel like you're going at a slower pace to start off with, but you'll definitely see the benefits then later on as you move through the project.
But it's more sustainable.
Absolutely, and that's the key thing, isn't it? So again, as a project manager, I've worked through a project plan, ticked off all my tasks, job done. Not so, because what you don't then get is that sustainability. You don't get the return on investment. You don't get people satisfied in the new world. You get people being forced to accept a new way, and whether it's a new tech, but they're not necessarily there fully invested, and therefore you won't see the productivity benefits, the efficiency gains, and just the overall general satisfaction that you would had you spent time doing it properly in the first place.
Yeah, and interestingly, science actually backs up your view on this one, because if we look at specifically the analogy of ripping off a plaster, and this is a bit trivial, but I'll share it all the same, they've actually studied this, and it is better to do it slowly, bit by bit, rather than in one. And a plaster's perhaps not a great example, but the idea here is, should you just have all of the pain at once, or eke it out bit by bit? And actually, science says you should eke it out bit by bit, because the human systems, whether physically or psychologically, is more able to deal with prolonged kind of chronic pain than it is a massive stress to the system, which could just completely overload things and throw you out of kilter. We just had Verity come in again as well. Thanks, Verity. So if you are a small business with no HR department, who should manage the project? I think this is a great question, because loads of businesses are going to fall into this category. So Richard, what's your take?
Yeah, so this is very much a selling it as a development opportunity, isn't it, to an individual? But believe me, I've been there again. So it may seem daunting at the outset, but go and get your head around something that will work, a framework that will work. Try with something small and work through it. But honestly, once you've done that, you'll see the benefit to you as the person leading the change. You'll see the benefit then to those being impacted by the change. And actually, you'll get good at it, because once you practice it and do it a few times, you'll see that doing it properly has real great outcomes. So yeah, it's just embrace it, go for it, and learn along the way. None of us are professional change practitioners at the outset. We start very much in that amateur state and learn from some of the experiences, and you'll get better as you do that, for sure.
Absolutely. And I guess, the way things changes over time as well. So like even a change management process that might work today might not work in 10 years time or even tomorrow. And equally across it, you intimated to this earlier that maybe different frameworks would work better for different businesses in different industries. Yeah. Exactly the same kind of thing. Change is changing all the time as well. So, we need to constantly be amateurs, constantly be the white belt in the room, if you like, and looking holistically at what have we got in front of us and what's the best way to bring our people along this journey with us. Excellent. Okay, so before we wrap up, Richard, we're almost coming to the end now. I'd love to leave our audience with some practical key takeaways. So I've got 3 quick fire questions for you. First one being, if HR professionals could do one thing differently when leading change, what should it be?
Yeah, so go and get a framework. That, I guess that's come through the message, doesn't it, really? But find a framework that works. For me, ADKAR is brilliant because it's simple, it's easily understood by everyone. So do that. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. Question number 2 then is, what lessons have you learned from major transformation programs? Let's give us your number 1. If you could only share one lesson you've learned with the audience, what would it be?
Oh, wow. Yes. So project management is 10%. So working through the activities is 10%. Change management is 90%. So taking people on the journey with you and getting them to the place where they are fully invested and the adoption looks great. So put your energy into change management. Beautiful.
Final one then, Richard, before we close. What should organizations stop doing immediately when it comes to change management?
Stop thinking that it's comms and training alone, because it's a much bigger beast than that. People think they can send out the occasional communication, do a little bit of training, and it's job done. It is not that at all. So approach it with the respect it deserves, but apply it properly, and you'll see massive benefits.
Fantastic. Richard, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your thoughts. Really appreciate it. I think one of the biggest measures from today's conversation is that successful change isn't something you announce and move on from. It's something you actively manage. It's something you communicate, listen to, and reinforce over time. And also to everyone who's joined us live, thank you so much for your questions. Some great questions today. Comments, contributions throughout the sessions. We love you. Thank you so much for supporting the show. If you have found today's conversation useful, please like, share, and follow. If you know someone in your network who might be interested or gain something from listening to this conversation, please share it with them. That's why we do these. And follow us so you don't miss future installments, basically. We'll be back soon with another discussion exploring the trends, challenges, and opportunities shaping the future of HR and the workplace. And don't forget, we have, if you want to come and see us and meet us in the flesh, you can come and check us out at Erupt Disrupt next Tuesday. I believe you'll be there, Richard.
I'll be there, Jamie. Yeah,
fantastic. Sure. So if you've enjoyed what Richard had to say today and you want to come and meet him in the flesh, this is your opportunity. So there is a QR code somewhere on the screen now. So if you scan that with your mobile device, you can get yourself some tickets. It's going to be over at Mills and Reeves in Birmingham, I believe. We've got some fantastic content planned for the day, and it's always an incredible networking session. So get scanning that QR code, get your tickets, and we look forward to seeing you there next Tuesday. Until then, thanks again. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.